Before we check into today's video, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed. It's totally free and allows you to never miss one of our stories. The imposing figures of Ilodalf and his grandson Dozor moved with grace through the obsidian halls of the Imperial mothership. Their sharp red eyes glinted in the soft glow of the overhead lights, while their pointed ears caught the bips and buzzes of the life-supporting systems that protected them from the void. As they passed by the towering viewpoints, the swirling blues and whites of the planet below, Earth, bathed their regal forms in a cool ethereal light. Ilodalf's flowing robes trailed behind him, enhancing the aura of dignified command that surrounded him.
"Do you know why I have brought you here?"
Ilodalf asked, his voice echoing in the vast corridor. Dozor glanced at his grandfather, his broad shoulders hidden beneath his sleek black robe. The youthful muscles of his arms spoke of strength yet to be fully realized, a sharp contrast to Ilodalf's more slender build and the subtle stoop that came with age.
"I believe you've judged me ready to learn how to conquer planets,"
Dozor replied, eagerness evident in his tone. Ilodalf's red eyes narrowed slightly.
"Your father doesn't think conquering planets is worth the effort anymore," he said. "He believes our empire can expand by transforming barren worlds into livable places, that war is unnecessary now."
As they continued down the corridor, other Yeltils in gleaming battlesuits passed by, each armed and exuding readiness. They bowed deeply as they approached, eyes cast downward in deference before moving along.
"Father is a fool,"
Dozor scoffed, his pointed ears stiffening.
"His peaceful nature is causing overpopulation in our colonies."
Without warning, Ilodalf halted and moved toward a vast viewport that stretched from floor to ceiling. The sudden shift caught Dozor off guard. The former emperor gazed at the planet below, its swirling clouds and vast oceans mesmerizing. His deliberate silence signaled that his grandson's words were ill-considered.
"Your father is a sentimental pacifist,"
Ilodalf finally said, his gaze and mind still focused on the planet. He heard Dozor step closer, the younger Yeltil's reflection appearing beside his own on the gloss.
"Vaxor fails to see how much power he's relinquishing by choosing long planetary development over a swift conquest. He doesn't understand how vital the glory of victory is to keep our kind united and focused. But I will ensure you grow up knowing the full potential of our species, and that you witness my last incursion with your own eyes."
"Will we use the antimatter bombs or harness the energy of their own star to destroy them?"
Dozor's eyes lit up as he recalled the legendary tactics Ilodalf had employed before his birth. Ilodalf turned to face him, a subtle smile playing on his lips.
"A planet's worth is tied to how quickly we can inhabit it after conquest. Delay too long, and our people forget who secured the victory. Most of our battle tactics damage the biosphere, disrupt natural cycles, and require years to restore habitability. But not this time. With this planet, I will prove once and for all that conquest is the true path for our species."
Dozor's confidence wavered, his fingers tightening around the folds of his robe. His sharp eyes searched his grandfather's face for answers.
"How's that possible?"
"Follow me,"
said Ilodalf. Dozor glanced at his grandfather as they traversed the winding corridors, reaching a subsection where the walls were adorned with luminescent patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid light, casting an ethereal glow on their sharp features. As they moved deeper into the heart of the ship, the air grew cooler, tinged with a mix of chemical scents. They arrived at a vast chamber where doors were replaced by a shimmering energy field that parted smoothly at their approach. Inside, the room was busy, alive with shifting colors and constant motion. Dozor's gaze was immediately drawn to shelves lined with countless colorful vials, filled with swirling liquids that seemed to glow from within. Mechanical tentacles descended from the ceiling, efficiently moving the vials between stations with precise, fluid movements. 3 Yeltil scientists were immersed in their tasks, combining the vibrant substances into various specialized machines. Holographic glyphs floated above their workstations, displaying streams of data and complex molecular structures that shifted and reformed in real time. Dozor froze, his eyes wide with wonder. The sheer scale and complexity of the lab left him momentarily speechless. Sensing his grandson's interest, Elodolf took the opportunity to break the scientist's concentration.
"Come here,"
he commanded firmly.
"Explain your work to my grandson."
At the sound of Elodolf's voice, the scientist started. One fumbled a vial, which slipped from his grasp and shattered on the floor, releasing a mist of shimmering vapor. Another nearly toppled an entire shelf of vials, but managed to steady it just in time. They quickly gathered themselves, abandoning their stations to rush toward Elodolf and Dozor. The trio bowed deeply upon reaching them. Their appearances were distinct from the warriors in the corridors. They wore sleek garments embedded with glowing circuitry that traced intricate patterns across the fabric. Their eyes were enhanced with optical devices that flickered with streams of data, and delicate apparatuses were glued to their pointy ears. The first scientist, the one who had almost caused the shelf disaster, straightened up. His name was Jaor, a tall Yeltil with slender limbs and nervous energy, the highest rank insignia etched into his skin, denoting his expertise.
"We scanned the planet, Your Royal Highness,"
Jaor began earnestly.
"We found weaknesses not only in the humans, but in all animal life. Each of us has developed our own solution to exploit these weaknesses, and they are all complementary. The planet will be ours within a year, and the trees and algae will remain intact, ready for our species."
"Your own solutions?" Dozor asked, his eyes widening with interest.
"Yes, Your Royal Highness,"
replied the second scientist. His name was Selik, a shorter Yeltil with sharp features. Bowing again, he explained,
"I have developed a powerful formula that will alter their most basic cellular functions. It will exponentially increase the energy needs of every creature on the planet, causing them to fight over scarce resources and eliminate each other."
The third scientist, named Vun, stepped forward with a slight air of impatience. He was of average height, his gaze betraying his eagerness.
"Your Royal Highness,"
he said, bowing even lower than the others,
"my solution is a compound that will heighten their aggression. Already desperate from hunger, with my nanopowder, even the tamest creature will succumb to instinct and fight to the death."
Jaor pulled his colleagues back, eager to explain his contribution.
"My solution will strike them at their weakest, hungry and enslaved by anger. This is when my mutagen acts. It affects their skin, lungs, bones, and brains, causing diseases that will spread across all species."
Dozor surveyed each of them, surprise evident in his expression. Before he could speak, Elodolf addressed him.
"See, grandson, hunger, violence, and disease will cleanse the planet. These are the brilliant minds that thrive within our empire."
Observing the scientist's satisfied smiles, he added,
"But one should never stake success on untested methods. If their ideas are not as effective as they claim, we can still descend with infantry and finish the survivors in the old ways. Should this happen, it will be your chance to prove yourself in battle, Dozor. I hope you are ready."
The scientists exchanged uneasy glances, their mouths opening as if to protest, but they remained silent. Elodolf noticed Dozor's eyes light up with anticipation.
"I'm always ready, Grandpa. Father will be surprised when he hears that I too will become a Yeltil warrior."
Elodolf studied his grandson thoughtfully. Though they hadn't spent much time together, he recognized the familiar spark of ambition. Unlike his weak father, Dozor was eager for conquest.
"Of course he will," Elodolf affirmed. "Now prepare yourself. In the next planetary revolution, the Imperial Mothership will quietly release the chemical weapons into the atmosphere. You will monitor the operation with me from the bridge each day until it's time for you to go there, and I expect nothing less than your full commitment."
Dozor bowed deeply. "I won't disappoint you."
"Good,"
Ilodolf replied, a hint of a smile touching his lips. He then turned to the scientists.
"Continue your preparations. We have much to accomplish."
With a final bow, the scientists hurried back to their stations, the mechanical tentacles resuming their precise movements overhead. Ilodolf gestured for Dozor to follow as he made his way back toward the bridge, the order to release the 3 chemicals into Earth's atmosphere already stuck into his throat. Day 1 of the Yeltil invasion. As the first light of dawn brushed over the rolling hills, Samuel leaned against the old wooden fence that separated his farm from his neighbors. His weather-beaten hat shaded his eyes as he gazed out over the field. Jacob approached, his boots crunching softly on the dewy grass. Samuel came to stand beside him. "Did you see?" Jacob nodded.
"Woke up to a ruckus. By the time I got out here, it was all over. All my livestock gone."
He ran a hand through his graying facial hair.
"Never seen animals turn on each other like that."
"Same here," Samuel said quietly.
"Look at old Brutus out there."
He pointed to the lone, bloodied bull grazing hungrily.
"He's the only one left."
Jacob squinted.
"Look at all the blood. He doesn't even seem bothered."
"Eating like there's no tomorrow," Samuel observed. "You'd think he'd be exhausted after whatever that was." "What do you reckon happened?" Jacob asked, concern etched onto his face. Samuel shook his head. "I wish I knew. Animals don't just fight to the death for no reason."
"Could it have been some kind of predator?" Jacob suggested. "Wolves, maybe?"
Samuel frowned.
"Wolves wouldn't make the cattle turn on each other, and besides, there'd be tracks."
Jacob sighed deeply.
"Should we call the vet? The cops?"
"Already did," Samuel replied. "But I have a feeling they won't know any more than we do." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Brutus tear into the grass with an unsettling fervor. Day 2 of the Yeltil invasion.
"Morning, Dave,"
Linda called from behind the kitchen counter, her apron dusted with flour.
"It's been a while since I've seen you in the kitchen, Linda,"
Dave replied, rubbing his temples as he approached. The clamor of the school cafeteria was louder than usual.
"You look like you've had a rough day, and it's not even lunchtime,"
Linda observed, raising an eyebrow.
"You have no idea," Dave sighed. "I've had to break up 10 fights since the first bell."
Linda's eyes widened.
10? That's more than we've had all year."
"Tell me about it,"
he said, shaking his head.
"And the weirdest part, they only listened when I intervened. Teachers couldn't get through to them at all."
Linda frowned.
"That's strange. Usually they're pretty well behaved around Mrs. Thompson."
"Exactly," Dave agreed. "But today it's like they're on edge, restless."
Linda glanced out at the sea of students.
"They do seem different."
"Different is putting it mildly," Dave muttered.
"Any idea what's causing it?"
she asked.
"No clue," he admitted.
Linda chuckled softly.
"That makes 2 of us. But you know what's even stranger?"
Dave looked at her expectantly.
"What's that?"
"Yesterday they ate all their vegetables,"
she said, a note of disbelief in her voice.
"Come again?"
Dave blinked. Day 3 of the Yeltil invasion. Martin sank into his sofa, remote in hand, as the evening news took over his TV, replacing his favorite fishing show. The familiar face of anchor James Anderson filled the screen.
"Good evening,"
James began solemnly.
"We interrupt your regular programming to bring you breaking news."
Martin leaned forward, sensing the urgency in the anchor's tone.
"In the past few hours, thousands of incidents of traffic-related violence have been reported across the country,"
James continued.
"Authorities are urging everyone to remain indoors and avoid unnecessary travel."
A montage of chaotic scenes played. Cars abandoned on highways, flashing police lights, crowded hospitals. This is unreal, Martin muttered. James glanced off camera briefly before addressing the viewers again.
Officials are working diligently to understand the cause of these sudden outbreaks. In the meantime, please stay safe and await official updates.
A muffled commotion sounded from somewhere in the studio. James hesitated.
We're experiencing some technical difficulties.
Suddenly, a man stormed into the frame, wild-eyed.
Here's your coffee, James!
He shouted, hurling a chair at the anchor. James ducked just in time, the chair crashing against the desk.
What the fuck?
He exclaimed. The screen abruptly cut to black. Then a cheerful advertisement jingle filled the silence. Martin stared at the TV, heart pounding. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through social media feeds, flooded with confusion and panic. Day 10 of the Yeltil invasion. General Marcus Steele paced back and forth in the war room, his medals clinking softly against his uniform. His gaze was fixed on the array of screens displaying chaotic news feeds from around the globe.
This widespread violence and hunger can't be a coincidence, he barked. It's got to be the Chinese or the Russians pulling strings behind the scenes.
Secretary of Security Robert Langford adjusted his tie.
General Steele, with all due respect, our intelligence suggests otherwise.
Marcus stopped pacing and glared at him.
Then what, Robert? You expect me to believe this just happened out of the blue? Mass hysteria doesn't just spontaneously occur on a global scale.
Robert took a deep breath.
Listen, some satellites have detected an unusual structure in orbit.
Marcus raised an eyebrow.
An unusual structure? Our radars and telescopes haven't picked up anything.
That's precisely the issue, Robert continued. It's not detectable by conventional means, but the gravitational measurements indicate that something massive is orbiting Earth.
The general's eyes narrowed.
Gravitational measurements? You're telling me there's an invisible behemoth up there causing all this?
Exactly, Robert replied. It's exerting a gravitational pull significant enough to be measured even by the old sensors. The guys at NASA believe it's the source of the anomalies we're experiencing.
Marcus scoffed.
And how do we know this isn't some elaborate ruse? A new stealth technology, perhaps?
Robert shook his head.
No one could have launched something that big in orbit, much less in secret. This is something entirely different. We have to consider the possibility that it's extraterrestrial.
The room fell silent. Marcus clenched his fists and slammed the table.
If what you're saying is true, and you can prove it, then it's time to use the nukes. We can't let an alien force compromise our planet.
Robert sighed.
We've already attempted that, General.
Marcus stared at him in disbelief.
What do you mean?
Missiles were launched discreetly last night, Robert admitted. They had no effect. It's like they vanished before they reached the target.
Marcus ran a hand over his face, eyes wide.
So what do we do now?
We're imposing rationing and quarantine, Robert replied. It's crucial to maintain order while we figure out another plan.
Marcus nodded slowly.
Very well. Keep me updated.
Emily Grace Thompson, you listen to me!
Emily's grandma, Agnes, slammed a pot onto the kitchen stove, her silver hair frizzing out of its bun.
The government will arrest you if you don't get rid of that beast. He's not a beast, Grandma,
Emily protested, her cheeks flushed.
Mr. Whiskers is my pet.
Agnes pointed a stern finger at her.
He's the size of a cow. All farm animals are against the law now. All food is supposed to feed humans because of the alien invasion. He's not a farm animal.
Emily crossed her arms defiantly.
No one even eats the kinds of leaves Mr. Whiskers eats. I'm not breaking any rationing rules by keeping him.
Her grandmother huffed.
That oversized rabbit is consuming resources we can't spare. He has to go.
Tears welled up in Emily's eyes.
You can't make me get rid of him.
Agnes took a deep breath, her face softening just a fraction.
I won't have to. If you don't do it, the authorities will.
Do you want them storming in here?
Emily opened her mouth to retort, but Agnes held up her hand.
Enough. I'm calling the cops myself.
She turned toward the hallway, pausing only to add,
And I need to go to my room. The mandatory 1-hour quarantine after getting angry is still in effect. Fine,
Emily shouted, her voice cracking.
do whatever you want.
She stormed out of the kitchen, tears spilling down her cheeks. She burst through the back door and ran across the sprawling fields of the family farm. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the rows of corn, the stalks swaying gently in the breeze. Emily's heart pounded with her footsteps as she made her way to the old barn at the edge of the property. She slipped through the wooden fence into the overgrown pasture where Mr. Whiskers resided. The sight before her always took her breath away. Mr. Whiskers, a colossal bunny that hadn't stopped growing since the aliens appeared, was munching contentedly from a massive trough filled with leafy greens.
Hey there, big guy,
Emily whispered, wiping her tears away. The bunny lifted his head, twitching his pink nose in greeting. His gentle eyes met hers, and he hopped over, each movement causing the ground to tremble slightly. She buried her face in his soft fur.
Grandma wants to send you away,
she murmured.
but I won't let that happen.
Mr. Whiskers nuzzled her shoulder, and Emily stepped back, determination hardening her features. She unlatched the fence gate, pushing it wide open.
It's time to go,
she said firmly.
You need to run away, far from here.
The bunny tilted his head, large ears swaying.
Please, you have to understand,
she pleaded.
They'll come for you.
She tried coaxing him out, waving her arms and pointing toward the open fields. Mr. Whiskers simply sat back on his haunches, watching her with calm curiosity. Frustrated, Emily ran back to the trough and scooped out a handful of leaves.
Look, your favorite,
she called, stepping outside the fence. The giant bunny's nose twitched, and he hopped forward eagerly.
That's it, come on,
she encouraged. Once he was outside, she scattered the leaves toward the distant woods. Mr. Whiskers bounded after them, disappearing into the tree line. Emily exhaled a shaky breath, relief and sorrow mingling in her chest.
Be safe,
she whispered. Half a year into the invasion, things weren't going as well as Illadov had expected. From the main terminal of the Imperial mothership, he watched several live feeds from the surface. The towering Metastriders, his species' massive war machines, were locked in battles with human forces across all 7 continents. Some front lines showed signs of progress. The 6 long metallic legs of the Metastriders had broken through defenses and reached cities. Lasers and explosives fired from the machines, while smoke rose from burning buildings. But in other areas, the Metastriders were being pushed back. One had even been destroyed by hundreds of humans who immobilized it by using grappling hooks to tie its legs to the ground. Ilodov didn't look away from the screens.
Explain why my grandson's Metastriders are facing so much resistance. What happened to your brilliant plans?
It's Vun's fault, Your Royal Highness,
Selleck replied, standing stiffly beside the bridge's command console.
His aggression formula worked too quickly. The most violent individuals killed each other in the first week, reducing their population too fast. This left too much food behind, which weakened the effects of my energy consumption formula.
Lies!
Vaughn shot back, pointing at Selleck.
Selleck's energy formula is the problem. He didn't account for the augmented violence and hunger acting together, which caused them to turn on each other too fast. His miscalculations have nothing to do with me.
Silence!
Ilodov commanded, his voice cutting through the argument.
We'll assign blame later. Focus on fixing the mistakes with infantry. Start with you, Vaughn.
Selleck's formula made them not only hungry, but stronger and faster, Your Royal Highness,
Vaughn insisted.
Vun's aggression formula made them more hostile toward us as well, Your Royal Highness,
Selleck countered. Ilodov sighed. They were only willing to criticize each other, not themselves. Then he remembered there was a third scientist.
I made a catastrophic mistake, Your Highness.
Shaor spoke up, his voice trembling. The admission silenced the bridge.
Their immune systems have adapted to the mutagen. They're no longer getting sick.
Ilodolf appreciated the honesty. That's no worse than the others.
That's not all,
Shaor continued, shaking.
In rare cases, the affected creatures grow in size and intelligence.
Ilodolf repeated slowly. Grow in size and intelligence. Before he could process this, an emergency transmission from Dozor came through, the terminal turning red.
Grandfather, something's attacking the Metastriders!
What do you mean by something? Ilodolf asked sharply.
It's best if you see for yourself,
Dozor replied. A live video feed appeared at the center of the screen. The optics showed a dense forest where the trees shook violently, groups of leaves falling to the ground at regular intervals. Emerging from the tree line with crushing force was a massive four-legged beast. Each casual stride flattened entire trees beneath its hooves. Its two sharp, menacing horns jutted forward, their grimy surface giving the creature a wild appearance. Its fierce gaze locked onto the front line, steam billowing from its flared nostrils. As it scraped the ground with its hooves, even Ilodolf could sense what was about to happen. It was ready to charge. On the opposite side of the battlefield stood a Metastrider, the Yeltild Empire's ultimate infantry weapon. Standing on 6 articulated legs, its metallic control module shimmered in the sunlight, well above the canopy, while its massive hook-like feet dug deep into the earth, taking a defensive stance for the oncoming battle. Without warning, the creature launched itself into a full sprint, the ground trembling beneath its thundering hooves. Each long stride devoured the distance between it and the Metastrider, its muscular frame rippling with each step. "Initiate defensive protocols!" A voice barked over the comms, but it was too late. The beast collided with the Metastrider in a direct impact. Its horns punctured the lower armor plating with a shriek of metal, driving the machine backward. The Metastrider's legs buckled as the sheer force pushed it through the forest, trees splintering and crashing around them, power lines snapping and sparking as they were torn down. The battle raged on as the machine came to a halt on a nearby road, where the artificially compacted ground gave its hook-like feet more adherence. The creature briefly disengaged, giving the Metastrider's pilot a chance to activate the energy cannons. Targeting systems locked on, but before the pilot could fire, the beast lunged again, feinting at the last second. One of its horns snagged a leg of the Metastrider, and with a powerful twist of its head, the metallic limb was ripped clean off, almost smashing a human military vehicle in its fall. The towering machine toppled, crashing into the forest floor with a deafening boom that broke even more trees and shook the earth. High above, another Metastrider captured the scene from a distance. Just as the battle seemed to reach its peak, a formation of human aircraft sliced through the clouds with their engines roaring. They had been tracking the fight, waiting for their moment. Missiles detached from their wings, leaving trails of smoke as they homed in on the exposed underbelly of the fallen Metastrider. The pilot barely had time to react before the missiles hit. One after another, explosions ripped through the armor, igniting the machine's interior. A massive fireball spread, consuming the Metastrider in a fiery blaze, scorching the land and leaving only the burning wreckage on the ground. Ilodolf couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. "What are you all waiting for? Kill that thing!" he shouted, broadcasting his command to every Metastrider on the planet, pointedly ignoring Shaor, whose mutagen had created such a monster.
"It's not the only one, Grandfather,"
Dozor said, his voice overflowing with worry. The main feed shifted to another section of the battlefield, an urban area now reduced to a war zone. Skyscrapers stood like hollow shells, windows shattered and facades scarred from previous skirmishes. Amidst the ruins moved a creature unlike any Ilodolf had ever seen. The beast was enormous, its sleek body covered in vibrant orange fur striped with inky black lines. Its movements were fluid and stealthy. Muscles rippled beneath its fur as it navigated the debris with ease. Vertical slit pupils in its piercing amber eyes gave it a predatory gaze, and long whiskers twitched as it sensed its surroundings. The giant feline prowled the streets, its padded feet making no sound despite its size. A metastrider moved into view, its sensors locking onto the creature. "Target acquired," the pilot announced, initiating the weapon systems. Laser cannons whirred and unleashed a barrage of energy beams, slicing through the air toward the beast. Yet it failed to hit. The creature was astonishingly fast. It leaped onto the side of a crumbling building, scaling it in seconds as the lasers scorched the ground where it had stood. From its new vantage point, the beast let out a thunderous meow that echoed through the deserted streets. It then sprang from the building, landing atop the metastrider with a resounding clang. The machine staggered under the sudden weight, its 6 metallic legs whining in protest. With deliberate malice, the creature plunged its claw into the control module and tore through the metal. Then it hooked the pilot by his uniform, lifting him effortlessly into the air. The Yeltil soldier dangled helplessly, his limbs swinging wildly as the creature raised him higher, its claws tightening around the fabric. After transferring the pilot to its mouth, the beast's claws seized vital components, ripping them out and triggering a cascade of failures that rendered the metastrider useless. The machine collapsed, its joints giving way as it sank to its knees, joining the wreckage of the vehicles below. The creature leaped off and landed gracefully amidst the chaos, a Yeltil warrior still alive in its mouth. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect was how the creature seemed to relish the encounter. It didn't just kill out of necessity. It played with its prey, prolonging their terror. The beast sat atop the ruined metastrider, licking its paw clean, while the remnants of the Yeltil crew scrambled to escape. On the ground below, human forces began to emerge from hiding. They cheered and rallied, using the creature's distraction to advance. Soldiers moved in, securing the area and taking aim at other vulnerable crew members abandoning the destroyed metastrider. The tide of battle was shifting, and Ilodolf's forces were no longer the dominant power. Back on the bridge, Ilodolf watched in silent disbelief. These Earth creatures weren't just helping the humans. They were doing the heavy lifting. The realization settled heavily upon him. The invasion was failing, and the consequences would be dire.
"Why hasn't anyone shot it?" Ilodolf demanded. "The orange beast is in the open, not even taking the battle seriously."
Dozor's voice wavered.
"Because of the thing."
The feed changed again, showing a bright white creature with a pink nose. It was calmly munching on a tree, holding it in its enormous paws. A moment later, it blurred into motion, moving so fast the sensors struggled to track it. The next scene showed the creature kicking a metastrider, which exploded against a mountain in the distance, the battle lasting mere seconds.
"For the void's sake, Jawor, what have you done?"
Ilodolf stood, trembling in fear as the scientist prostrated on the ground. Jawor's forehead pressed against the floor as he remained unable to speak. As Ilodolf considered punishment, the feed showed humans advancing through the chaos, taking advantage of the animals' attacks. Dozor's voice broke through again. "Grandfather, I'm surrounded!" Human vehicles closed in, bombarding his metastrider with explosive drones and RPGs aimed at the leg joints.
"All units, protect your leader!"
Ilodolf shouted. The bridge grew tense as humans and Earth creatures dismantled the metastriders one by one. The final feed showed humans smashing the protection of Dozor's control module and dragging him out as he screamed. The following orbit of the mothership was oppressively silent. Ilodolf stood motionless, staring at the screens. Jawor remained prostrate, trembling, while the other scientists avoided his gaze. Many days had passed since the catastrophic defeat. Elodolf remained alone on the bridge, a shadow of his former self. The once commanding presence now sat slumped in his chair, eyes vacant as they stared into the abyss of space displayed on the main screen. His regal robes hung loosely, and the royal insignia he once wore with pride rested forgotten on the console beside him. Throughout the mothership, whispers spread among the crew. Concern grew as their leader isolated himself, refusing counsel or comfort. Finally, a group of senior officers gathered the courage to approach him.
Your Royal Highness,
one of them began cautiously, stepping forward onto the deserted bridge.
We didn't come to ask you to release the scientists this time. The humans hold Prince Dozor captive. We must contact Emperor Faxor and request reinforcements to rescue the next Emperor.
Elodolf did not respond, his gaze fixed and unblinking. Another officer dared to speak.
Our forces are depleted, and our ground weapons are ineffective against these creatures. Only the Emperor has the resources to turn the tide.
A third added, Your son would understand the importance of rescuing his heir. Please, Your Highness, for the sake of the Empire. Elodolf's eyes flickered, a hint of the old fire returning.
My son, he whispered bitterly. He abandoned the path of conquest. He would negotiate with these primitives rather than crush them.
Perhaps negotiation is our only option now, the first officer suggested gently. At least until we can regroup.
Elodolf's hands tightened into fists.
Leave me,
he ordered in a low voice. The officers exchanged worried glances but obeyed, retreating from the bridge and leaving him in solitude once more. The following day, an incoming transmission shattered the oppressive silence. Elodolf, still alone on the bridge, hesitated before accepting the communication. The main screen flickered to life, revealing two humans in a stark white room. One was a tall man with sharp features and piercing eyes. The other was a woman with a stern expression and short cropped hair. Between them sat Dozor, bloodied, motionless, and bound to a chair. His regal robes were now tattered rags. A synthesized voice translated their words into Elodolf's language.
You must be the former Emperor with a late-life crisis,
the man said coldly.
Your grandson told us much.
Elodolf's blood boiled, but he kept calm.
I assume you've contacted me to negotiate.
Wrong,
the man replied bluntly.
Your son, the current Emperor, has already struck a deal for the boy's life. This agreement requires you and your scientists to come down here and help us fix the mess you've created.
The woman added,
Don't worry, we won't kill you. We have plans for you while your son makes his way here with his fleet.
Had they truly contacted his son? Could it be through the salvaged comms of the Metastriders? Panic gripped Elodolf. Could they have extracted the faster-than-light codes from Dozor? A gaze at the bloodied Dozor, and he had his answer. For a brief, dark moment, the thought of abandoning his grandson and bombarding the planet crossed Elodolf's mind. His gaze flicked to the main controls. He could end this, rain destruction on these insolent creatures, and reclaim his pride and his people's honor. But before he could even move toward the weapons arsenal interface, a cascade of screens blinked to life across the bridge. One by one, the panels controlling the ship's systems froze, their interfaces locked. The cascade spread like a virus, rapidly overtaking every active control system.
What is this?
Elodolf muttered, panic creeping into his voice as he tapped the screen in front of him to no avail.
That,
the tall human said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction,
would be the control override order transmitted across the stars to your ship. Your son assured us you wouldn't be a problem anymore.
Elodolf's fists clenched, fury barely contained as he stared at the frozen consoles.
Now you wait for us,
the human continued.
We don't have a giant eagle to fly up and collect you,
he smirked.
but the rockets will do the job just fine.